This demonstration is about Qualys Remediation Manager. Qualys Remediation Manager is an app in the ServiceNow App Store developed by Fruition Partners. The app requires Fuji Patch 2 and can be purchased by customers browsing the ServiceNow App Store. The main purpose for this app is that it will generate incidents for devices where remediation tickets occur. Remediation tickets are essentially security breaches or security vulnerabilities that occur within the client infrastructure. When those vulnerabilities occur, tools like Qualys, which are essentially security vulnerability management solutions, are used to scan for these vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that are deemed high risk or critical are then used to create remediation tickets. Remediation tickets are essentially high risk or critical vulnerabilities. So those tickets, when they get created, they're created on the Qualys side. And then an integration like Qualys Remediation Manager can be used to retrieve those remediation tickets from the Qualys cloud using the Qualys API. So Qualys provides an application programming interface that we can tap into, and I believe is a REST call we make to retrieve those tickets. So once those tickets are brought into ServiceNow, then the next thing we do is that we are going to evaluate each remediation ticket to determine whether we create an incident and associate that remediation ticket to that incident, or we update an existing incident with this new remediation ticket. Incidents are tied to devices. By this I mean, if it is determined that an IP address has a remediation ticket on it, then there will be an incident created and associated with that IP address. And then all vulnerabilities that occurred on that IP address for which remediation tickets have been created, all those remediation tickets will get associated to the incident using a related list, and there'll be like a one-to-many. The relationship will show one incident, many remediation tickets, depending upon the tickets that occurred on that device. Once we have an incident, then it becomes easy for us to apply service level agreements to those incidents to make sure that the assignment groups that those incidents have been given to can now both respond and resolve issues within the designated time frame. So whatever the response SLAs are, or what the resolution SLAs are, that assignment group now for these types of tickets can be held accountable. The next phase here is that let's jump into the application itself. So we can assume that the customer has purchased the application and has installed the application on their instance. Once they install the application on their instance, the Qualys Remediation Manager will show up in this fashion. Remediation tickets that are brought into Qualys will be in an import set table. And the import set table are basically going to be loaded with key fields that we have identified as part of the integration that we need to bring into this environment. You may have customers wanting to bring additional fields, and the bottom line is that if those fields are in the XML, then we need to parse out the content of those fields. If those fields are not in the XML, then we are not going to be able to bring them in for the next customer. But basically, the way it works is this. Once we run this integration, the data is going to be brought into this table, and you'll see the data begin to populate. There are properties, and these properties are basically tell us what the REST API is, give us a username and password to access it, and set up a default assignment group. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the default assignment group basically says, if we have a logic or algorithm for assigning tickets to multiple groups, so if you have multiple groups you want to assign tickets to, if a particular assignment group does not exist, the system will default to the default assignment group, and it will hold the default assignment group accountable for resolving that issue. Attribute maps is how you're going to map assignment groups, category, subcategory, priority, and other components of ServiceNow So you're going to have to predetermine what these vulnerabilities when they come in, or the remediation tickets when they come in, how they're going to map to ServiceNow. So if you open up one of these items, you actually get to see how impact, urgency, and priority are going to be set. This is default setting. It can be modified based from one client to the next. You also get to see category or subcategory. By default, these categories here have to be configured on the customers within the customer's incident to make sure that vulnerability is a selection in their category list, and remediation is a selection within the subcategory list. And then, their assignment group is their assignment group. But if a customer says, well, hey, I want to have multiple assignment groups listed in here, and I want to, when a remediation ticket comes in, I want to determine what assignment group to assign it to based on additional criteria, like, for example, an IP address or a QID or both, then the algorithm will have to be modified for that specific customer. Today, out of box, what we have is that everything will get assigned to the default assignment group until we understand what logic the customer wants us to use. So this is important because this is how you relate vulnerability tickets coming in to incidents. The script include, these are the different script includes that are driving the entire solution. The information that comes in, the XML is processed through here. There are custom utilities that this XML processor calls when it wants to, execute a specific function. And then this script include, what it does is it checks to determine if the incident has already been closed. So every IP address has an incident if that IP address had vulnerability occurring on it. If that incident state is closed, it doesn't programmatically attach the next new remediation ticket to that incident. What it does is it checks the status. If the status is closed, then it opens a brand new incident for this IP address. So you may see IP addresses with multiple incidents. That's because the prior incident was closed before this particular vulnerability came in. That's what this script does. The REST calls are here. There's a test API REST call, but we'll need to configure this REST call to connect with the client's endpoint. Typically, in this case, the endpoints, the way they're configured per Qualys is that, every client is going to have a specific endpoint that looks like this with access information that will need to be retrieved from them. You can essentially configure this REST call, and you can actually test it. You test it get method, and just to validate that endpoint actually can be reached with the security credentials provided. You can run a quick test and see the responses here. When you run this test and the response is 200 or successful, then you know that when you run the integration, it will work because it will use the same REST API. There's also transform maps. The transform map is what actually creates an incident. And then, there's a scheduler. This is what we actually are going to trigger or initiate the integration with. And then, there's you can look at transaction logs specifically. You can look at jobs that are running, and then the support button. So with that said, we're going to just kick off the integration. I don't have a schedule, so I just click execute now, and what I then do is I'm looking at running job, and sure enough, it's been kicked off. So when I look back inside of these remediation tickets, they're starting to come in. And based on all the logic that is built out of the box, you get to see the remediation tickets tied to a single incident because they're all on the same IP address, right? If I scroll through here, you'll get to see when the IP address changes, like here's an example, you see that the ticket actually changes, right? So let's click it again. I think, we'll get to the end here pretty quickly. Yeah, so again, you get to see where when the IP address changes, the ticket number changes. And you can essentially, for this first one, as I described earlier, you can actually click into the incident. And by so doing, you get to see all of the remediation tickets that are tied to that specific incident. Integration does. It builds relationships between incidents and remediation tickets. This way, now that you have an incident with all these remediation tickets assigned, when this gets assigned to the security group, whoever is on call, needs to make sure that these remediations are all resolved. Right? That is my demonstration, and thank you.